Welcome to this session. I have something very interesting to report. Today is Monday. A couple days ago on Saturday I was playing tennis with a young friend, and I was standing with my racket waiting for the ball, and without warning, suddenly both legs completely collapsed under me, and I landed hard on my hip bone. Actually, it bruised the bone. I ended up feeling it later that night. I rolled onto my back for a moment or two and waited. Then I was able to roll forward, bring my knees up, and with the help of my hands slowly stand up, and I started walking. At this point, my tennis friend had come over and was asking if I was all right. I told him I'd had a stroke, but by then we were busily talking and things were acting much more normal, and we ended up creating another date for a week from that day, next Saturday, and I drove home. By that time I was wondering what this was. Was it really a stroke? So I decided to do some tests. So for starters, I raised my right hand forward over my head. Everything seemed normal. Raised my right hand sideways over my head. That was quite normal. Raised my left hand forward, and it stopped there. Raised my left hand sideways, and it stopped there. Okay. Rotated my head to the right. Rotated my head to the left. It only went that far. Tried rolling my eyes. If I roll my eyes to the right, that's way over there. To the left, nothing happens. How about my tongue? I can put my tongue out here on the right. On the left, it won't go. This is beginning to look like a stroke. Okay, what else shall I check? My left leg. How far forward can I move it? About there. How about my right leg? That's much bigger. I tried going in back, same result. How about rotating my foot? Can I rotate my left foot out? Only about that far. Can I rotate my right foot out? All the way 90 degrees. And inward similarly. So apparently this stroke significantly damaged my ability to control my left side, and maybe 30-40 minutes later, which is when I got out of the car and did the tests, this damage was still apparent. Now, I have to say I've experienced a number of strokes, but this is a big one. One more thing that might be worth trying: standing on one foot. It's very common for elderly people to have a great deal of difficulty doing this, while young people can do it easily for long time periods. So let's start by standing on my right foot. I'll lift my left leg in the air, and let's see if, well, that's a few seconds. How about the left leg? Now, I want to say that for a couple of years now, I have had a lot of difficulty standing on the left leg. Couldn't stand on the left leg nearly as long as I could on the right leg. Let's try it now. That's longer standing on the left leg than I've been able to do it for about 8 years. Did this stroke improve my ability to stand on my left leg? What are strokes for? Are they supposed to be beneficial or damaging? I have a theory about this, and I'd like to discuss it with you. By the way, 24 hours after the event, I tried those same tests, and everything was perfectly normal. So, complete recovery in 24 hours or less. Okay, let's go ahead with strokes now. For essentially almost all of the time human beings have been living on this earth, lifespan has been rather short. When lifespan was 25, 30, 40, 45 years, humans were much more worried about being eaten by tigers and starving to death than they were worried about the condition of their cardiovascular system. However, now things are really different. I'm not worried about starving to death. I may be worried about the country's economy, but it doesn't look like in the process I'm going to totally starve anyway, and I don't see any saber-toothed tigers in the neighborhood, so I'm not too worried about being eaten alive. What's left to worry about? Well, maybe the condition of my cardiovascular system. Could it be wearing out? What happens if capillaries crack, get clogged, leak, break? How does the body succeed in delivering blood to those cells and removing the waste blood from the cell to recycle it? The answer, put very simply, is the body has to replace the blood vessels. Okay. Easier said than done. A single cell has to receive a supply. Each one. How does the body locate it? These things are microscopic. There's no map. The answer turns out to be quite simple, but a little startling. The cell has to be totally starved for blood. It has to be screaming its need for it, and then the body can build the capillary directly to it and connect it perfectly. But until then, it cannot reconnect. So, suppose the body is forced to destroy, or it can no longer depend on the blood vessels going to that cell. It must wait for the cell to call before it can reconnect a new blood vessel to it. Is that what strokes are for? If that's true, then strokes are a requirement for any human who needs to live an extended life period. Because without the stroke, the blood cannot replace blood vessels at the lowest, smallest level. that leaves us open to a real question. How about my experience with strokes? I've had hundreds of them. But what about the first one? I can tell you where the first one was in my body. It was in the back of the brain, and it served the circuits that interpret the visual images I produce. I know when it happened. It was about 8 years ago. And I know what the result was. Let me give you an example of a situation that requires that imaging. I'm driving. I come to a corner and there's a stop sign. So I stop. Now I need to look right and I need to look left. But after this stroke, looking once wasn't enough. The images were too confused. I could not orient right. I had to look twice, maybe 3, 4 times, and then I could trust that the image was interpreted properly and I would know whether to stop or go. Was it repaired? Well, let's put it this way. It is now 8 years later. 6 weeks ago, I finally reached the point at which I could simply look right, look left, trust the image, and go. It took 8 years to repair that damage. That's not very successful, was it? That was the first one. How about others? My experience has been that almost all of the others have happened when I was alone and when I was working out, either against the wall hitting tennis balls or lifting weights. And in each case, the body would in fact counsel me after it happened what to do, and each time it's just walk around a bit, brace myself if I was having balance problems, and then test to see if I was okay. Well, how do I test to see if I'm okay? First test, raise my arms over my head. That's normal. If I'm having a stroke, generally it looks like that. Move my tongue from the right side to the left. If I can do it, fine. If I can't, that's a stroke. Walk a little more. Can I finish a complete English sentence? Like, this is a complete English sentence, and I finished it. If there's a stroke, I can't do it. So it's pretty clear when these things happen, and they've happened frequently, quite often. And my guess is my body is basically working on this. That's fine. I'm glad to have it. At least I can balance on my left foot now like I never used to be able to. I was startled by this and really pondering it when I went to church on Sunday. And I mentioned the incident to a friend of mine. He pointed to a friend, a lady that we both know, sitting a few seats down from us in the church, and told me that the same day I had my stroke on Saturday, her husband had a stroke and died. I didn't know what to say, and I was really touched. And I still am. But this leaves me with a real issue. It's apparent that When doctors predict that a stroke can kill you, they're telling the truth. They're not exaggerating. Then it would be reasonable if, at the possibility of having a stroke, I would be terrified. And if I were, then it would be difficult for the body to convince me to allow it to go ahead and do it. Especially if what the body needed to do was to prepare for the stroke. Now remember, I've had, well, I didn't say it, but probably pretty close to 500 of these things over the past few years now. And the only reason that they are so simple now is that the body, after the first one, has become experienced in preparing for them. Perhaps it builds in all of the required blood vessels before the stroke, so that all that's left to do is the last, oh, I don't know, few millimeters or less. So that there's only a few seconds left, and it's done. Well, am I unique? Well, I'm married to my wife, and she's had a number. Her first stroke, pretty major one, was last June. She fell down, and at her request, her daughter took her to the emergency room, and she recovered there and came home. It's been a little over a year now. That was in June. This is in September. And she still does not have complete, perfect use of her left side. Is that something to complain about? Well, after 8 years, I had just recovered, so a year and a quarter isn't that big a deal after all. Has she had other strokes since then? Lots of them. Some of them more major than that one. And in each case now, her body seems to send her a signal saying, sleep. This happens in the middle of the day or when she's free. She just lies down and takes a nap, and when she wakes up, maybe 5 minutes later, maybe 6 hours later, she's fine. Recovery is over. No problem. So it looks like her body, similar to mine, after the first stroke, which I assume it uses as a learning experience, simply does them when they're needed, and in the end, she is better off. Here is the issue that this brings up, finally. We know that originally both she and I had been taught by everybody else around us that strokes are terrifying things to happen. And again, if the body says, well, I need to prepare for this stroke, what's my reaction? Well, if that really is my reaction, the body, which is my partner, is stuck. It can't prepare for it. It can't do anything about it. What happens then? Well, the body limps along with the defective cardiovascular system until it finally fails. If that had happened, I would have died on the tennis court on Saturday, more than likely. Because that was a big one. How did I change that terror into acceptance? It's an emotional issue. And after all, these bodies we live in are emotional structures. I think the answer is in the symbols that Ellie and I both use a lot. We meditate with them. They guide us. And I think they allow us to change emotions in a way that's more suitable to our lives. So in the end, strokes are beneficial. They're done in negotiation with the body to find times and places where they're appropriate. They do not involve fear. They're beneficial. But we had to use the symbols to help us change the emotions so that we could see them that way. And that gave the body the freedom to do what it needed to do. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again.
Oh, that's very good.
I think that's the best of them.
Yeah, on the